This is it, the end of the Small Brawl tournament. And you know what else is the end? That's right, death. So I thought a hearse would be appropriate for the occasion. Also, the first character we ever saw in this game was Mortimer back in the opening cutscene. He had his talking frog kidnapped by Calypso, and it seemed appropriate to bookend the series by finally wrapping up the story of Mortimer and his frog. We will learn the fate of Mortimer's beloved pet after we complete the now slaying movie theater level. Only 4 opponents. That's surprising. We've had 5 in every level since Mini Golf Mayhem. Oh, wait. Yeah, there's gonna be a boss. Guess that shouldn't be a surprise. We can shoot the garbage cans to make them dispense trash back out to us, accomplishing nothing. But it's always nice to have the interactables. That is where Small Brawl shines. Fantastic interactables throughout this entire game. Frankly, the ones in this level leave a lot to be desired compared to many of the previous levels. In the end, this level is pure challenge. The enemy AI seems to be ramped up, or at least the shape of the level benefits them to an extraordinary degree. In all of the PS1 Twisted Metal games, any sort of inclined surface will absorb a lot of your missiles because the tracking simply doesn't do a good job of compensating for the incline. And the vast majority of this level consists of the sloped aisles, which means a lot of our missiles have a very hard time finding a target. Our special, however, is very, very good. Deals a lot of damage, made short work of Mr. Slam. Almost. He's still got some juice. He's gone. Everyone's gone. The boss is approaching already, which is, to say the least, pretty unexpected. Not only that, the boss is gargantuan. The size of several vehicles combined, because that's exactly what it is. Piecemeal is so called because it is made from the scraps of numerous other vehicles. When we get close, we can see the grill of Hammerhead, the front of Mime, the back of Sweet Tooth. The back tires even appear to be the large tires that comprise Axle. I'm not sure that's exactly what they were going for because the design is slightly different, but it'd be very clever if that was what they were implying. So I will give them the benefit of the doubt. Piecemeal is a very cool boss. And the way it appears out of the movie screen, like some kind of ghost, like Nosferatu in that Are You Afraid of the Dark episode. Very inspired. Adds a lot of atmosphere to this level that frankly is kind of lackluster. Not a fan of this level, but I do love the presentation of Piecemeal. At this point I have no ammo, and ammo acquisition is a tall order here. So I just decided to bully Piecemeal. Gargantuan target that he is, he can still be pushed around a little bit at the cost of a great deal of our health. But with the shield, I was able to whittle him down to about 75% HP, which caused him to disappear just as quickly as he arrived. And there so happens to be 3 enemies remaining. After each one dies, Piecemeal will reappear, and we'll have to whittle away another quarter of its HP bar. Very, very unique boss fight. Honestly, I love it. This old-timey popcorn cart that was conspicuously waiting in the back of the theater. If you hit the wheels with any weapon, rolls down the aisle and destroys the stage. Most movie theaters don't need a stage, but this one does, until it gets destroyed. Opening up access to some very, very useful pickups. One of the 2 health refills available here, and another power missile. There's 1 power missile all the way at the back of the aisle, which respawns very infrequently. Speaking of power missiles, that is basically what Shadow's special amounts to. Very high damaging shot. Comparable to Mr. Grimm's special, actually. But it has homing and manual detonation. The manual detonation part is the only thing that makes it similar to previous and future incarnations of the Shadow vehicle. They're known for firing at a shot that you then detonate manually with perfect timing. But the Grim Reaper that Shadow fires does explode on contact, and that is honestly the best way to go about using the special. The blast radius when you manually detonate it is very, very small. Small enough to be virtually useless. So I tend to use it exactly the same way that I do Mr. Grimm's special. I always try to fire it when I have a clean, straight shot on a target that isn't very far away. So if I can't manage those exact circumstances, probably won't fire it at all. And if I mess up the timing, fire it and don't quite hit the target, I'll pretty much write that shot off, assume it's a loss. And there's a very small chance it will curve around and end up hitting anyway. That chance is, of course, much, much greater if your target happens to be Piecemeal. I find if you fire your special in its general direction, you're probably going to get a hit. So it is a boon to have that weapon in this level. Especially because this level is actually quite difficult. This, overall, I have to admit, is one of the easier Twisted Metal games. It's meant for kids. They really toned down the difficulty, at least on medium difficulty. I even considered doing this entire Let's Play on hard mode, in light of that fact, but I did find hard mode to be a little more difficult than I was comfortable with, and way too frustrating. Not a very satisfying hard mode, in my opinion, and also not an accurate representation of how most people would have experienced this game. On to yet another encounter with Piecemeal. You can see the souls of the various vehicles forming in the center of the room to create Piecemeal. Terrifying ghost that he is. And I had no weapons. Now I do believe I have literally every pickup in the entire level. At least until some more respawn. That's maybe the thing that makes this more frustrating than it needs to be. Is a lack of pickups. I haven't actually done the math to compare this to any of the other levels, but it feels like there are far fewer here than there are in any other level in the game. And they also don't generally seem to be the most useful pickups. Obviously the power missiles are very good. Almost everything else here is relatively weak and very likely to go to waste because of the aforementioned issues with the shape of the level. We got the inclined aisles and the rows of seats. I find the rows of seats to be very, very frustrating. The camera can get stuck inside of them because they're all destructibles, so the camera doesn't compensate for them properly. But you can't destroy them, and the AI can't destroy them unless Piecemeal is around. Piecemeal drives right through them like they're nothing. And if you don't lure him into doing that quite a bit, you're probably going to have a hard time as the enemies duck in and out of the rows of seats and waste even more of your ammo. There are also no interactables that produce random pickups, which has been a staple in many of the previous levels. Like the dartboard in the last level, the swing set all the way back in the first level. I really feel like if you shot the garbage cans, sometimes at least, random items should have popped out in there. But it's never happened, and it probably never will. Adds a bit of artificial difficulty to what is already quite a challenging level. And that's a perfectly reasonable thing to do in the final level of a video game. I still like the level more than I have any complaints about it, but that is a minor complaint. More items would have meant your opportunity to do things would be greater. Whereas I spend far too much of this level just wandering aimlessly, hoping to grab one of the random item spawns. Or just waiting for my special to regenerate. And it's not like it's just an idle time-wasting mechanic. You're in tremendous danger the entire time you're waiting to get more weapons. So, very careful use of the shield is necessary for survival. The shield uses the same inputs as that of Twisted Metal Black, which means 4 relatively difficult inputs, sometimes of questionable detection. Nonetheless, our vehicle is honestly perfect for the job. So even though I lost all my extra lives, I've still been carried to victory. The tournament is concluded, and Mortimer has earned his wish. Let's see him reunited with his long-lost pet frog. No editing this time. This is all the loading screens that I've had to watch every time I've completed one of these playthroughs.
Man, you can have your stupid frog back. Little Tier's been making so much noise, I can't even go inside.
Technically, such exuberance is common following radiation.
Radiation?
On second thought, you can keep the frog. Victory! Victory!
The cute little talking frog was a monstrous death trap all along. Shoulda known. Here's our victory screen for completing an entire tournament on medium difficulty. That'll tell you if you're a cheater. And of course, our credits, which are extremely hard to read. Just a wall of names flashing by in a matter of seconds. There are definitely some familiar ones mixed in there, but most of these names represent people who had never worked on Twisted Metal before and would never work on Twisted Metal again. This is just a strange cul-de-sac in the series, made out of, I believe, contractual obligation to Sony. And Sony was apparently quite happy with it. Specific sales numbers are not known, but they are believed to have been adequate for such a ridiculously late PS1 title. So, well done, development team. Here's our beloved cast of characters. Mostly familiar classics, and Trapper. Also, Mime is in the mix. And that's not all. One last unique playable vehicle is in the mix, and I had to cheat to get my hands on Piecemeal. Even though it's the final boss, still doesn't have maxed out stats. It has perfectly reasonable balanced stats. Piecemeal is a collector and a scavenger, as we know. Let's get a nice eyeful of the Twister spoiler and outlaw sirens on top of it. Chunks of almost every single vehicle in the game. And I owe it a little test drive. Let's put it up against all the other secret vehicles in the game. Also Sweet Tooth, because Sweet Tooth, main character of the series. There we go, that's a lot of them. Back into Now Slaying, which obviously Piecemeal should dominate. It's his home turf. We never got to see it with 5 simultaneous opponents, so obviously we had to revisit. Now, when we played as Trapper, I talked about the ridiculous unlock method of beating the entire game with every single character, no cheats allowed, and also you have to play it on hard difficulty, which I couldn't do, so I had to use game shark codes to unlock Trapper. There is some controversy as to whether or not you need hard difficulty. And that controversy I've seen repeated all over the internet. People are constantly saying, I beat the game with every single character, and I didn't unlock Trapper, what's the deal? And then someone will say, have you tried doing it on hard difficulty? So the jury is out. I feel like very, very few people have legitimately unlocked Trapper to do the full testing. What I do know for certain is, in order to unlock Piecemeal as playable, you have to beat the entire game on hard difficulty, for certain this time, with Trapper. So, on a technicality, Piecemeal is the most difficult to unlock vehicle in the entire Twisted Metal franchise. if only because Trapper is the hardest vehicle to unlock, and you have to beat the game with Trapper to unlock Piecemeal. Also, that's not exactly a trivial task because the playable version of Trapper is terrible. But if you pull it off, your reward is Piecemeal, who answers the burning question, what if Mime had really good stats? Piecemeal is also capable of mimicking other vehicles' specials, which we didn't really see the boss do. But I'm doing it quite a bit here. Now notice I just acquired Hammerhead special. Hammerhead is not one of the secret characters, so it's definitely not here in the combat arena. However, it seems like as a failsafe, they always have Hammerhead special, Outlaw special, and Darkside special loaded into every arena at all times, so that if you try to emulate a special, and there's not one available for whatever reason, you will just default to one of those three randomly. If, for example, you put only Piecemeal and Mime in your combat, then you'll just trade those three specials back and forth. They knew they had a good gimmick on their hands, and they figured people would enjoy it well enough to warrant slapping it onto two different vehicles. And I think they were right. Overall, I think all of the design in Twisted Metal Small Brawl is very, very good. This is a very cool Twisted Metal game, very, very well designed. It is also, perhaps, my single least favorite Twisted Metal to play. The physics are just so slow and floaty, and there's all these little quirks that are really hard to observe and explain, but they make it all feel like some sort of independent fan tribute to a Twisted Metal game, rather than an officially released Sony product. I don't blame the developers for this at all. It's clear that they were extremely talented, and they were just faced with the impossible task of putting together an entire team that had never worked together before, and building an engine from scratch, and making the entire game in about a year's time. The tragedy of it all is that development started on the vastly superior Twisted Metal Black engine. If they had been allowed to use that throughout the entirety of development, I strongly feel this would have been one of the top 3 Twisted Metal games, rather than one of the bottom 3. Fortunately, they did as well with the assignment as anyone could have possibly expected them, and Sony was happy with their work. It didn't ruin their careers. Dave Goodrich, the director, did go on to continue working on the PSP Ratchet & Clank games and Jak and Daxter games. He also got to work with Harmonix on many of the Rock Band games, which I was very happy to see as a big rhythm game nerd. So, good for him, good for everyone who worked on this game. I have immensely enjoyed showing it off. I don't enjoy playing it casually, but as a thing to look at and talk about, absolute joy. Figures that in a battle royale, with all the special super vehicles in the game, Sweet Tooth would be the last survivor. Always overpowered, that guy. Main character of the series, through and through. And with that, I am finally done with Small Brawl and its terrible, lackluster title screen and character select screens. Presentation was also a bit of a weakness in this game. Just another of many reasons I held off on covering Small Brawl until I'd finished every other Twisted Metal Let's Play. So there we go, in-depth coverage of every game in the entire franchise is now available for your viewing pleasure. I highly recommend you familiarize yourself with other, better Twisted Metal games if you haven't already. Thank you all very much for watching, and I hope you've enjoyed Twisted Metal Small Brawl.